Time, October 18th, 1977. Place, the City of Angels. The discovery of the dead body of Hollywood prostitute Yolanda Washington, a crime which, at that time, and taking into account a big city like Los Angeles, didn't raise many concerns or questions, especially when considering the high-risk lifestyle the victim led. But to no one's expectation, this was just the beginning of a series of bodies, totaling 10, all found in the same hilly area, with the same marks on their bodies. These marks describe the hell those young ladies, some of whom were only 12, 14, and 15 years old, faced before dying by strangulation, earning the perpetrator the name the Hillside Strangler. 7 of the victims were all discovered within the same month, showcasing just how thirsty the duo was to kill. Yes, you heard me right. Despite the media addressing the killer as one person, it was later established by the police that this was not the work of one man, but rather 2 or more were involved. Kenneth Alessio Bianchi and his cousin Angelo Buono Jr. And without further ado, let's delve into the minds of these 2 psychopaths. Kenneth Alessio Bianchi entered the world on May 22, 1951, in Rochester, New York. His biological mother, struggling with alcoholism and working as a prostitute, gave him up shortly after his birth. At just 3 months old, he was adopted by Frances Bianchi and her husband, who worked as a laborer at the American Brake Shoe Foundry. By the time he could speak, Frances realized her son was a habitual liar. His early years were marked by laziness and deceit. When Kenny was about 5 and a half, Frances grew concerned over his frequent daydreaming spells, where he would fall into trance-like states. A doctor diagnosed him with petit mal seizures after noticing that his eyes rolled back during these episodes. However, he reassured Frances that Kenny would eventually outgrow the condition. Despite possessing an IQ of 116 and showing talent in both verbal and artistic fields, Bianchi struggled academically and never lived up to his potential. His erratic grades reflected his chronic underachievement. He was also prone to emotional outbursts and quick to anger. Concerned about his behavior, Frances sought help from a psychologist, who determined that Kenny was overly dependent on his mother. Frances, determined to give him a better chance, made financial sacrifices to enroll him in a Catholic elementary school, where he excelled in creative writing. However, tragedy struck when Kenny was 13. His adoptive father passed away from a heart attack, leaving Frances to support the family on her own. Kenny continued his education at a public high school, where he maintained a clean and polite demeanor, steering clear of the cultural upheaval that gripped many teens in the 1960s. In relationships, Bianchi held women to impossibly high standards, expectations heavily influenced by his Catholic upbringing. He often compared them to the image of the Virgin Mary, leading him to feel frustration and anger when they fell short of his idealized views. Although he was deeply attracted to women, he was quick to condemn expressions of female sexuality, disapproving of revealing clothing like V-neck sweaters or tight jeans. While he demanded unwavering loyalty and devotion from the women he dated, he himself pursued multiple relationships at once, showing no concern for the standards he imposed on others. After graduating from high school in 1971, Kenneth Bianchi married a young woman his age. However, both were too immature to make the relationship work. Just 8 months into their marriage, his wife packed up their belongings, left him, and filed for an annulment. The experience devastated Kenny. He felt deeply hurt and betrayed. Once the initial heartbreak passed, Bianchi decided to enroll in community college, where he took courses in police science and psychology. However, his academic performance was lackluster, and he eventually dropped out. When he applied for a position at the sheriff's department, his application was rejected. He soon drifted into a job as a security guard. This position gave him opportunities to steal, and he would often give the stolen goods to his girlfriends. His habit of theft forced him to switch jobs frequently, and it became clear to him that he was stagnating in Rochester. In late 1975, at the age of 26, Kenny decided to leave Rochester behind and move to Los Angeles, where he moved in with his older cousin, Angelo Buono. Angelo Buono Jr. is often described as a deeply flawed individual, marked by a combination of physical unattractiveness and a troubling emotional and intellectual profile, aka ugly as hell. His personality was characterized by coarseness, vulgarity, selfishness, and sadism, yet he paradoxically enjoyed a reputation as a ladies' man, even dubbing himself the Italian Stallion. Throughout his tumultuous life, he married multiple times and fathered several children, many of whom were subjected to various forms of abuse. Born on October 5, 1934, in Rochester, New York, Buono's early life was shaped by his parents' divorce. In 1939, he relocated with his mother, Jenny, and older sister, Cecilia, to Glendale, California. His mother worked tirelessly in a shoe factory to support the family. Raised in a Catholic environment, Buono's upbringing had little influence on his moral or educational development. He remained largely uneducated in all aspects of life. Despite his apparent need for sexual relationships and the occasional necessity to treat women decently to fulfill his desires, Buono harbored a profound disdain for them. He openly insulted his mother with derogatory language, calling her a cunt straight to her face, while maintaining an emotional attachment to her until her death in 1978. Even as a teenager, he boasted about committing sexual assaults. Buono's criminal behavior began early. He was convicted of grand theft auto and sent to a reform school at just 16 years old. He idolized the notorious rapist Carol Chessman, admiring his cunning methods for luring victims under false pretenses. This admiration would later influence Buono's own criminal activities. By the mid-1970s, when his cousin Kenneth Bianchi moved in with him, Buono had cultivated an extravagant lifestyle that included flashy jewelry and a collection of young girls. He quickly became a mentor to Bianchi, teaching him how to exploit women for their own gain. Together, they devised a scheme to recruit girls into prostitution under threat of violence. Their reign of terror escalated when they manipulated 2 teenage runaways into becoming sex workers. The girls lived under constant threat of severe punishment if they disobeyed. Eventually, one girl managed to escape with the help of an attorney named David Wood. When Buono learned of this escape plan, he issued threats against Wood, prompting the lawyer to enlist the help of a formidable associate to ensure Buono ceased his intimidation tactics. After that incident, a change of plan occurred, and this time they started impersonating police officers. A great tactic to gain that momentary trust before they capture their victims. Their tactic was simple yet effective at that time, so they would usually cruise around Los Angeles in Buono's car and use fake badges to persuade girls that they were undercover cops. They would then order the girls into Buono's unmarked police car and drive them home to torture and murder them. The Hillside Stranglers' first victim was Yolanda Washington, a Hollywood sex worker, whose lifeless body was discovered near Forest Lawn Cemetery on October 18, 1977. The scene revealed that her corpse had been meticulously cleaned, with faint ligature marks around her neck, wrists, and ankles, suggesting she had been bound. Tragically, it was confirmed that she had been raped. Just a couple of weeks later, on November 1, 1977, authorities responded to a call in La Crescenta, a neighborhood northeast of downtown Los Angeles. There, they found the naked body of a teenage girl lying face up on a parkway. A concerned homeowner covered her with a tarp to shield local children from the gruesome sight. Bruises around her neck indicated strangulation, and the evidence suggested she had been killed elsewhere. This girl was later identified as Judith Lynn Miller, a runaway prostitute who was only 15 years old. The horror of her death prompted the homeowner to move his family out of state for safety. The coroner's findings noted that she had been bound similarly to Washington. On November 6, 1977, another strangulation victim was discovered near Chevy Chase Country Club. Like Judith, she bore signs of strangulation with ligature marks evident on her body. But unlike some other victims, she was not involved in sex work. She was an aspiring ballet dancer striving to support her dreams. She was characteristically a good girl. Her name was Lissa Teresa Caston, a 21-year-old waitress who had last been seen leaving work the night before. At this point, only Frank Salerno of the LA Sheriff's Department had known that a serial killer was at work. Tragedy struck again on November 13, 1977, when 2 young girls, 12-year-old Dolores Cepeda and 14-year-old Sonja Johnson, were last seen getting off a school bus and approaching a car occupied by 2 men. 6 days later, their bodies were discovered by a 9-year-old boy who had treasure hunting in a trash heap on the hillside near Dodger Stadium. The bodies were decaying with insects eating their flesh. It was later confirmed. Both girls had been raped and strangled, with no indication that the murders had occurred where the bodies were found, strengthening the idea of multiple killers, not just one. On the same day as the discovery of Cepeda and Johnson's bodies, hikers stumbled upon the nude body of Christina Weckler, a 20-year-old woman found on a hillside near Glendale. Christina's case was particularly disturbing. She showed signs of torture with injection marks present on her body, meaning that the killer are starting to experiment with other methods of killing, such as in this case, lethal injection, as well as other methods like electric shock and carbon monoxide poisoning used on other victims. The grim discoveries continued when Jane King, an actress aged 28, who had gone missing around November 9th, was found in an advanced state of decomposition near an off-ramp of the Golden State Freeway on November 23rd, with burns on her palms just like Christina Weckler's arms. It looked as though the killers were experimenting with new methods of torture. This ongoing pattern of bodies found in hilly areas led law enforcement to establish a task force aimed at apprehending the individual responsible for these heinous crimes. On November 29th, police uncovered the body of Lauren Wagner, an 18-year-old whose corpse also exhibited ligature marks and burn injuries indicative of torture. As the investigation unfolded, authorities began to suspect that more than one perpetrator was involved in these murders, despite media references to a singular Hillside Strangler, which was furthermore confirmed by a witness of Lauren's abduction. Beulah, a fragile woman in her late 50s, was already shaken after receiving a threatening phone call from a man with a New York accent. The caller warned her to stay quiet about what she had seen, or he would kill her. At the time, Beulah hadn't realized Lauren had been abducted. She thought it was merely a dispute and wasn't certain if it was even Lauren. She described the men's vehicle as a large, dark car with a white top. One of the men dragged Lauren into their car, and Beulah heard Lauren shout, "You won't get away with this." Beulah provided descriptions of the two men. One was tall, young, and had acne scars, while the other was shorter, older, with bushy hair and a Latin appearance. She was confident she could identify them again. The series of murders reached its tragic conclusion with the discovery of Kimberly Martin's body on December 13th, and then Cindy Hudspeth's on February 16, 1978. Hudspeth's remains were found in the trunk of her car after it was spotted abandoned off a cliff in the Angel's Crest area. In an unsettling twist during this dark chapter of history, Buono and his accomplice attempted to abduct Catherine Lore, daughter of famed actor Peter Lore, during their spree, but ultimately let her go upon realizing her identity. Apparently, they were huge fans for her father's work. While still committing murders, Kenneth Bianchi applied for a job with the Los Angeles Police Department and even participated in ride-alongs with officers as they investigated the Hillside Strangler case. So fast forward. After a failed attempt at their 11th murder, Bianchi confessed to his accomplice, Angelo Buono, that he had been on LAPD ride-alongs and was being questioned about the Strangler case. Buono flew into a rage and threatened to kill Bianchi if he didn't leave town. Under pressure, Bianchi fled to Bellingham, Washington in May 1978, where his girlfriend and son were living, effectively ending their criminal partnership. Months went by without any new incidents, leading to the belief that the Hillside Strangler had stopped. As a result, the task force's efforts slowed, and detectives shifted their focus to other cases until January 12, 1979. Bellingham police were alerted about the disappearance of two Western Washington University students, Karen Mandick and Diane Wilder. The two women were responsible and unlikely to vanish without notice. Karen's employer grew concerned when she failed to show up for work, recalling that she had taken a house-sitting job in a wealthy Bayside neighborhood through a security guard friend, a tactic Bianchi used to lure the poor girls to their demise. He forced the first student down the stairs in front of him and then strangled her. He murdered the second young girl in a similar way. Fortunately, without help from his partner, he left many clues and made several mistakes. With the aid of the news media, which described the missing women and the car to their audiences, a woman soon called about a vehicle that had been abandoned near her home in a heavily wooded area. Inside the car were the bodies of Karen Mandick and Diane Wilder. While the dead women were sent to the morgue, the security guard was apprehended the very next day. Noticing the similar style of murder, Bianchi quickly became a suspect. Afterwards, this suspicion was confirmed by a routine background check that linked him to the addresses of two Hillside Strangler victims. During his trial, Kenneth Bianchi pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, asserting that the murders had been committed by an alternate personality he named Steve Walker. His claim initially fooled some psychiatrists, who believed he might suffer from multiple personality disorder, now known as dissociative identity disorder. However, investigators called in their own expert, psychiatrist Martin Orn, who grew suspicious. Orn pointed out that genuine cases of the disorder often involved more than two personalities, prompting Bianchi to hastily invent a new identity, Billy. Further investigation revealed that the name Steve Walker wasn't created from thin air. It belonged to a student whose identity Bianchi had attempted to steal to fraudulently pose as a psychologist. Moreover, police discovered numerous psychology books in Bianchi's possession, suggesting that he had studied the disorder extensively and was deliberately faking his condition. Under mounting pressure, Bianchi finally confessed to fabricating the mental illness. In an attempt to reduce his sentence, he agreed to testify against his cousin and accomplice, Angelo Buono. However, when it came time to testify, Bianchi was evasive, inconsistent, and seemingly intent on sabotaging his own statements, likely in the hopes of sparing Buono from conviction. His efforts were in vain, as Buono was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Kenneth Bianchi is currently incarcerated at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla, Washington. His 2010 request for parole was denied, and he will not be eligible for another parole hearing until 2025. As for Buono, he died of a heart attack on September 21, 2002, in Calipatria State Prison of the California Department of Corrections, where he was serving a life sentence. And this sums up our case for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and for further information, you can check the references provided in the video description.